This podcast and every other podcast I make is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon. This particular episode was available on Patreon early, ad-free, and as an extended version. There's basically an extra discussion at the start that I didn't include on the YouTube version. Though, of course, this is not going to be the norm or anything. You definitely do not have to support, but it means a lot and it helps me create these unique, sort of niche games industry podcasts that I make. So thank you so much if you do support, and if not, check out the link in the description. Hi, Mike. Nice to see you again.
It seems like only last week we were here chatting.
It does, doesn't it?
Hanging out.
So much longer ago. I envy the time that you get to do this podcast. I recognize we're starting probably annoyingly late today. But if we were all in the afternoon time zone, I feel like everything would be so much better.
You think?
And easier to coordinate. Yeah, because like whenever I do like the other podcasts I do, for all of them, I just say 6 p.m. Always. Anytime after 6 p.m. is good. And everyone always makes that work because it's outside their work schedules as well. But for you, that would be like, I don't know, 2 in the morning or something?
Be something like that. I don't want to do the maths. It's too late.
Whatever it is, it's bad.
Yeah, exactly. That is good. No, I like the chat. I like the energy. It's interesting. I like the few episodes we've done where I've been in the States. Like I feel like I'm a completely different kind of personality at like 1 p.m. So
it's good. Usually my lunch break, and so I definitely treat it as a lunch break. Actually, it's kind of nice that it's like this show is my lunch break. It's like what used to be in the office, the sitting around the water cooler chatting kind of thing. Like I have a coffee during. Right now I have a smoothie. It's kind of nice. It's a good break in the day.
Whereas for me, it's like that weird 10 o'clock conversation you have in the bar when you've kind of either drunk too much or not enough.
Yep, it's going to be a lot of games industry this week.
Absolutely.
So,
when is that? The Game Awards, right?
Yeah, so we think Austin is going to be able to join us at some point. Troy can't. But this episode will publish the day after the Game Awards. The Game Awards is Thursday night here in Los Angeles, California.
Awesome.
Our call time is like 3:30 p.m. That's early. I'm sure a lot of people will show up later than that.
It's pretty early to get to like an evening do. So what is it? Is it like drinks and stuff beforehand and then the live show?
Oh no, Mike. I wish. No. There's a red carpet beforehand, which is what the call time is for.
Right.
And then everyone drinks it. Have you been? Surely you've been to a Game Awards.
I've never been to Game Awards. That's like the one I've not been to, yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so everyone
always the bridesmaid.
Everyone has a drink, usually in the lobby of the actual theater. And then throughout the show, which I've always complained is too long, and Jeff did say it's shorter this year, which I'm super stoked about, the bar closes, so you have to get your drinks in first and then sit there for 3 hours.
So they're not serving like drinks through the actual
No
awards.
Drinks or food whatsoever allowed.
Are you at tables or is it like in a road kind of theater?
It's like a cinema.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
But the bar closes, so you can't even like walk out to get a drink.
I was going to say, like BAFTA, they keep you liquored up. Like you are drinking.
Dice. I'm drunk every time. Smashed.
Dice. You've got those 2 bars either side, right? Yeah. And it's just like, oh
and
my goodness.
There's like no people in the middle compared to every other one. GDC bars as well. Not the Game Awards. No alcohol, which makes it long. But Jeff did say it's shorter this year. So this is a thing that I wanted to do because I thought it would be fun. Wow, Mike, wasn't it crazy yesterday at the Game Awards when Death Stranding 2 got revealed?
It was a disappointment to me. I thought
you didn't like.
I don't think Troy was heavily featured enough in the Death Stranding 2 trailer. I'm there for Troy.
Yeah, more Troy for the Death Stranding 2 follow-up trailers. Hopefully,
this is a fun game until one of us accidentally gets it right and gets in trouble with someone.
Yeah, I know. I was like, oh, maybe I shouldn't start with a Sony exclusive. Very excited about the Breath of the Wild 2 gameplay that we saw. Surely, right? Surely Breath of the Wild.
Do Nintendo do a lot of
they revealed the first Breath of the Wild at the Game Awards.
Did they? I'm pretty sure. I always think of them as fair play.
I'm sure that's really hard for Jeff to get because obviously usually they would do direct, but I'm pretty sure that's right. That's where it was revealed originally. I know the only thing that I, at least from the little attention I paid this week because my brain is fried, we're getting Jedi Fallen Order 2. What is it? Jedi... It's not Fallen Order 2. Basically the sequel.
I saw the key art went up, right?
Yes, there's definitely gameplay for that, which I'm super excited to see.
They've announced that. That's cool.
That one has been announced. The Game Awards 2022.
Let's not leak any Disney game news.
We'll not be doing that.
Let's be good.
Also, though, have you seen that there's the fan vote for the Game Awards?
Oh, yeah.
And I've seen Sonic Frontiers fans on Twitter are campaigning hard against Genshin Impact. So it's actually just these two fan bases massively outvoting Elden Ring and God of War Ragnarok because they're like Twitter communities.
Because they're the super engaged ones.
Yeah. So they are currently winning. I'm not sure what the actual outcome was.
Because it's largely peer judged, right? But like they've got like specific categories where it's audience awards. Is that right? I don't know anything about the Game Awards. I'm realizing I'm incredibly underprepared for this episode. Is it fan?
It's, I think, 10% fan votes or 20% fan votes. So it's basically a big media conglomerate. Also, YouTubers are on there as well who get to vote. And there's no discussion like there is for BAFTAs or anything like that.
Also, it's not the devs, it's press. This is specifically a press.
100% press, yeah. And again, YouTubers, some influencers, I think. And they don't have any discussions like you do for all the other award shows. Like every single other one.
Also, no jury, no kind of... Oh, okay.
You just throw a number at a screen, usually in like an Excel sheet, and then it gets thrown to Keely's team, and then the public votes count for a certain percentage. I'm sure it's on the website, but I don't remember exactly what it is. So it's
a numerically derived thing, yeah.
Yeah, it's certainly a bit of a popularity contest, but I suppose it's a celebration of the industry.
Games. Yeah,
that feels fine to me. I don't really have a problem with it. Sorry, it's.
I think that's fine for what Game Awards. Yes, I think that's fine for what Game Awards is. Like, I feel like there are other awards that are maybe more suited to kind of, indie darlings or kind of like aspirations towards celebrating the art form. I feel like Game Awards it's celebrating the industry, right? Like, it's
totally agree.
It's more that focus. Yeah,
that's what it's trying to do. Is just be a big old celebration of big old video games. Which I'm. Totally cool with. But still, huge thank you to the quote-unquote Academy for nominating God of War Ragnarok. Really appreciate that.
How many of this prestigious award, which you massively respect, are you up for?
I think we're up for maybe 4 of these prestigious awards, which I respect wholeheartedly.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
I'm actually not sure, but it's definitely a few. It's Game of the Year, Narrative, Music, Direction. Oh, and art, I think.
Cool.
All of which I objectively feel are deserved. So, welcome, Austin. Hello. And Banjo.
Hey, Austin.
He came in right at the same time as you.
We're very similar.
How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm trying to remember how the hell to...
Okay, stop talking.
I'm Mike.
I know. Who are you people?
Alanah. And
this is Banjo. Where did he go? Is he gone already? He is. Yeah, don't talk until you're recording, Austin. Stop talking.
Yeah, I'm trying to work out.
You're making content now. You're making useless content right now. Sorry,
I was just so zoomed out in Pro Tools that the playhead wasn't moving, but it's because I was looking at like 20,000 bars at a time. I am in fact recording.
Excellent.
You're looking at a Matrix.
So awards are 3 at a time, or something to that effect.
Yeah,
I feel like we do that. We've done this podcast quite a few times at this point.
Every year,
awards. It's good. I like it. It's like a little Christmas tradition. It's good.
The fact that the opinion has not changed at all. We're consistent.
Slowly getting more jaded, I think. Getting more jaded.
Austin, can you talk about what you just came from?
I was doing a seminar with the Society of Composers and Lyricists. Forgive my chewing. Oh dear God! The call's coming from inside the house.
He's always there.
The call
He's always there.
Hi, bud. Hello. Oh, he's got a toy in his mouth. Nice. Oh, okay.
I want to make an audio-only version and see what animations come out of the last 30 seconds of this. Ooh, what's that? Who's that? Ooh, oh, there's a toy in his mouth.
Yep. There
Have
it is.
at it, internet.
All right. Yeah, sorry, what did you just come from? Because wasn't it also sort of awards related?
Yeah, it was a panel of this year was the inaugural group of video game, I don't know why I put that in quotes, Grammy.
Allegedly.
The new category at the Grammys, specifically for games. And so they announced that a couple weeks ago, and they hustled to get together a little panel of all the various nominees. And so it was just like jump on and answer questions. But Louise Blaine, who hosted, who's done a lot with BBC and stuff, she's based in the UK. One of the other composers is based there. I think all the rest are here in LA. But they were like, here's the time slot. And the seas had to be parted. A lot of meetings got rescheduled, and obviously I'm fashionably late today.
That's okay. You were nominated for
Fireteam for the Aliens game. It was actually really funny because this is the first year, I think, since literally my career began. Well, certainly the first since Journey came out, which was 10 years ago, but I think longer than that, where I all the things I've been working on the releases are staggered such that I had no new game come out in 2022. It's funny how there's well it's an odd phenomenon where usually there's things are kind of like a few months down the road, something will be ready to come out. And we did ship an Aliens DLC called Pathogen. But that doesn't. I don't consider that.
Was Fireteam last year?
It came out. It came out over a year ago, like October. But the funny thing was because
I've been playing it this year. I think that's what it is.
Yeah, well, and you know because of the DLC, it kind of like there's I think plenty of folks that picked it up for the first time this year. But the soundtrack, so the Grammys are primarily focused on the soundtrack album release, and the soundtrack came out almost to the day 1 year after the game.
Wow.
Just because of legal things and Disney owning Fox and all kinds of stuff related to that. And then there's this question of which subsidiary record label under Disney is going to be the one that kind of picks it up. And then at some point it was like, okay, well now we've done this DLC, we may as well wait a little bit longer. Because then we can include the DLC, and it's sort of we don't have to think about anything there. And so then hilariously, I wouldn't have been eligible for this first Grammy if that soundtrack hadn't been so delayed, because the album's release date pinging off of the DLC is the only reason I even fell within the eligibility window, because the game was out significantly earlier. So it's a bit of, because I was actually very frustrated. I kept getting tweets all the time. People go, why is there no soundtrack album? And I'm like, I can't do anything about it. It's not of my hands. But it ended up being very beneficial. So it was very funny that the year where I don't actually have a game come out,
must be nice.
Should treat me well. Yeah.
I
did release that Journey album though, so that was sort of my attempt at a release this year.
It's interesting because okay.
One at a time, kids.
Mine hasn't arrived yet. I bought your the Journey album. Where is it?
The vinyl. Mm-hmm. That's very kind of you. I literally never looked at the list. Like I never kind of thumbed through it. Someone messaged me on one of the developers I'm working with earlier today, and was like, "Hey, mine just came in the mail today," and I was like, "I didn't know you bought one." That's
people hang they're getting it a lot, or at some point you'll get yours, I suppose.
Apparently.
There you go.
Great.
For the record, I made
respect
this.
Consumers, Austin.
I did this kind of quasi self-distribution vinyl thing with Bandcamp as an experiment, where they do all the fulfillment for you.
Yeah.
So I basically send them all the assets and do all the mastering, and I did a test print little listen party with a buddy of mine who has a really nice turntable set up in as a composer who has his plugged into his studio monitors, so I was able to do kind of a nice proper listening. And all that, but then once that's off into the presses, it's kind of out of my hands. And so literally
it's kind of not your problem, is what you're saying. Like if Alanah has an issue, she'd probably take it up with Bandcamp. Yeah,
vinyl at bandcampsupport.com, I think, is the email to direct your. No, but it's true. Like I've done total top to bottom self distribution before as an experiment.
Exhausting.
It is, like dealing with, mine hasn't arrived in the mail. Do you have a tracking number? And I did this once years ago we made a Journey piano album where we took a bunch of the music from Journey and rearranged it for solo piano, and then actually recorded that as a record. And I did a CD pressing of those and made like 1,000 and sold them all. And it was like an unending, just no, like, and I respect people reaching out to go, hey, mine showed up and it's bent to fuck or whatever. And I'm like, you know, I really, they have every right to complain if they paid for a thing and it shows up busted. I didn't do that. So then
you have to file the claim and yeah.
So then you have to message them and go, okay, well, you have two options. I can mail you a replacement, or I can refund you. And it's like, that's all well and good. If it was one person out of 1,000, I'd be all too happy to consider that the price of doing business.
Yeah.
But invariably, once you reach a certain critical mass, there's just a certain number of back and forth where you're like, this really shouldn't be my job. Like, there's people that do this as their job and are better at it and better equipped to deal with it. And so that was the appeal of Bandcamp's thing, is they said, we'll do all of it for you. So like, you know, and really with minimal, they don't charge much for that. It's kind of the ideal scenario.
Yeah, it's awesome.
But the result is that I didn't know that they had started shipping until today when I started getting tagged on Twitter. I was like, oh shit, I haven't got, because I ordered a bunch of like reserve ones, you know, to like, there's like a charity stuff that comes up and periodically. It's just nice to have like kind of a cash on hand. And they haven't come. In fact, I haven't even gotten any kind of tracking info or anything.
I have either, but I guess they'll probably be shipping this week or something. I don't know.
I'm assuming some people have gotten them, and I was like, wow, your tweet is literally the first time I've seen how they look physically.
Cool.
It's pretty funny.
Sorry to fully throw you into the deep end here, Austin, and you can not answer this question if you want it, or I can even edit it out. Did you see the update to the Mick Gordon stuff?
Meaning like from a few weeks ago?
Yeah. We haven't spoken since.
Are we doing this? We're doing this topic? Okay.
The only reason that I wanted to ask is because we had a pretty fair take on it. I listened back to the episode and thankfully was like, oh, thank God. But so many people have asked me to ask you how you felt about it.
I mean, it's one of those, I did read it. I read his entire
Me too, yeah.
post.
Very thorough.
Same.
Very, very thorough, and I commend him. I mean, look, I'll just say what I said that last time we talked about this. I'll say up front, I think the guy's a fucking genius. Like his GDC talk, which I looked on YouTube, it's the most views of any GDC talk they've ever uploaded.
Wow.
It's like a viral video.
I mean, it's super interesting, uniquely, like they're all interesting, but I feel like that one, like the backwards stuff, and it's crazy.
Well, and also just the charisma with which he delivers it.
Yeah.
You know, I was in the room and I remember going, this is the best GDC talk I've ever been to. And he and I had a panel together. I can't remember if it was the day before or day after, that I had arranged, and someone dropped out, and I asked him to fill in last second, and he crushed it on that as well. It was called Composer Confessions, of telling times we've horribly dropped the ball on a job and how we figured it out on the fly. And I got like 5 composers.
Idea and rolled with it, right? Like that's
his was amazing because he showed up and it all rhymed. He did it like a fucking Dr. Seuss. It was unbelievable.
Oh, no way! Oh, that's fun.
The guy's talent is pretty boundless, and so I have total professional admiration for him, and I look at the situation and I'm like, you know, his article looks quite damning. But at the same time, you know, I know people kind of across every end of the spectrum on this, so I'm inclined to go, I don't really feel like I should weigh in because the truth always seems to land in the middle of people's perspectives.
100%
you know, like
what I tended to assume when reading it was he got a lot of good evidence. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle, or there's some miscommunication that's beyond this probably. And
it does sound like
sucks.
Communication was not great on the project, regardless of where all the various chips fall. It does seem like, you know, I'm willing to assume that his screenshots and stuff are not just blatant forgeries.
No.
Like, I don't think that he would do that.
No.
The cost of being found out for doing that would be exponentially worse than just keeping your mouth shut.
I believe that he believes 100% of what he said. It's the account of what other people said that you can't guarantee is true. Like in that, what they were thinking. He cannot necessarily accurately say they did this because this. Because we don't know their side that well.
Well, and the other thing that I'll give him props for is he makes it very clear. It seems like his beef is very specifically with the sort of head of the food chain over there, and that the core dev team and all that, he really only had good things to say about. It seemed because it seemed like he had the foresight of knowing what might kind of be unleashed if he's not careful in his words. And he seemed to be very careful in his words and not just be like throwing random grenades. It seemed pretty meticulous. It seemed like it probably took ages to write.
Oh yeah.
Because it was very, and I'm sure it was vetted by lawyers, and it had that feel, even though it didn't feel
still very genuine
press conference-y. Yeah, exactly. It didn't feel sanitized per se. So it's one of those where, look, I have friends at id who I hold in very high regard and who I believe really did everything they could to make that game all it could be, and who believe, even in the midst of all this, who believe deeply in his talents and all of it. So it's one of those where I look at it, I'm like, I just look at it and go, it's such a shame. Like,
totally,
I don't know.
It's just a bummer.
It's a bummer because he's great. They're great. And the product, it's one of those, for all the concerns over the professional integrity, like that seemed to be really at the heart of what triggered all this. Is it was like his concern, which believe me, I understand this, is, I'm trying to do a thing that is, going to A, have my name on it, and B, it will be built in to have a lot of scrutiny, because the first one was such a smash success that, like, when you do a sequel, you don't, like, no one expect, like, when John Williams did Star Wars, he did not expect it to be a hit. But when you're doing Empire Strikes Back, you realize, okay, this is now a different situation. Like, we are going in with the recognition that this will have a lot of eyeballs, where we were praying for eyeballs the first time. Obviously, Doom's not quite the same because there's an existing franchise that was already beloved. But at the same time, like, I think it just was so much better than anybody was expecting it to be, and across the board, as a game and musically, that it was like, okay, now doing a sequel, we know there's going to be scrutiny. So I'm deeply sympathetic to the idea that his chief concern seemed to be, I just want it to be good. I just want to be able to do a good job. That messaging, regardless of any minutia that is lost to time or whatever, who knows where faults lie or miscommunications lie. I look at it, I try to be maximally objective and charitable in my read of it, but I can say he definitely did not seem to, like, he seemed to be coming from this good faith place of, as a composer, I want to do good work.
Yeah.
And the thing is, for all of the hubbub that kicked all this off of, like, people feeling like, why is this not as good as, it's funny because I look at it and I go, boy, people are being pretty goddamn nitpicky, if you ask me. Like, I think that the work is fucking awesome.
It
like,
is.
To me,
it
Eternal is
game.
excellent.
Yeah, but I guess
like,
it was when they looked at the files. No, sorry, Mike, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I don't like the composer involved here. I don't think he wrote his massive post because of the audience reaction. He wrote it because
the Reddit
like
post.
His boss threw him under the bus on Reddit, right? Which is
regardless
of any other aspect of this, you do not do that to someone you work with ever.
On Reddit, of all places.
Sorry, for someone who works for you. Apologies.
Yeah.
Like you don't throw if you're getting a complaint from the audience. Anyone who doesn't like anything about one of our games, you take it up with me. I'm not going to throw anyone who worked for me under the bus in public for that. And
I mean, it's pretty hard to...
That's unacceptable.
As someone who tries to be ultra charitable and benefit of the doubt about everything, like I just, to an extreme, like beyond perhaps what I ought to even, you could argue. It is hard for me to look at what was put on Reddit and go anything other than just like, what on earth was the goal here, other than a bunch of things that really look shitty. I don't know.
Doesn't look like a rational decision, does it? Doesn't look like something done with thought and compassion for your colleagues.
It is odd, and my heart, again, like,
I feel sorry for everybody in a way that I'm like, that this had to be public. I pity all of you that this.
Yeah, so should have been a thing. It sounds like that was tried, in fairness, but it so should have been a thing that we never even knew about in an ideal world.
When I tweeted that, and naturally it got a lot of response of people being like, no, this should be out in the public. And I'm like, man, as somebody who's like worked at companies where something was public, no, it just sucks. Like, you're so anxious. Everybody knows like all of these misguided pieces, and you just watch people spread lies. Like, it's just awful for all of them. I promise Mick isn't having a good time now that he's published that. Like, it still sucks. And sorry, audience, for not giving a proper synopsis of this one. Usually I'd give context to a story, but I really don't want to misrepresent this one, and it's quite long, and I haven't read it for a few weeks, so I hesitate to even like try to explain what he was saying. I'll leave a link in the description below so you can catch up. But there were a couple of things that I actually wanted to ask the both of you about, which I'd also love to ask Troy about. But there's a part of the blog where Mick talks about getting paid in minutes of work delivered. But what he gets paid for is the minutes of work used, not the minutes of work he creates. Is that a thing that either of you have experienced in any facet of this industry? Getting paid for what they use, not what you do?
It's somewhat specific to music, I would say. Would you say that's fair, Austin? Like, I don't think it's a conversation I've only really had with composers.
Okay. It's my assumption that it's specific to music, but I honestly don't know how, I don't know how animators work.
I was thinking maybe artists, like, do they pay hourly or do they pay...
So that varies. So generally, I guess let's talk about the music side of it first. That's specific, and then I'll fill in the gaps on everything else. But Austin, that's pretty standard? It's
certainly standard. It's especially standard with a AAA publisher, with more AA or indie developers. It's a wild west of whatever deal you want to make. But the Bethesda / Microsoft, Ubisoft, EA, Sony, it is very standard. They're all going to have subtle variations on this formula, but generally composers have a rate that they ask for and potentially is negotiated.
And the rate is based on time?
It is per minute that you deliver to the game.
Gotcha, okay.
So what he said was 100% industry standard insofar as... but they are beholden to pay for anything that they use. That's the part that was very eyebrow raising. Like I actually, I'll not say what it was for. I've told this story publicly, but I had a project where I went over of my own volition and recorded with orchestra and everything and delivered to the team beyond what, like, because the contract was super specific. You will write exactly this many. And it was so specific that it said per second. Like, they took my permanent rate and literally granularized it to the second and said, if you go past this, this is the rate. And so basically, once we signed it, I was kind of like...
You chose to do more because you wanted to deliver better work?
Yeah, but that was like, the game needs more. Yeah. Like, I'm sorry. Like, even though I wrote boatloads of music, I was like, there's a few things that could use some additional coverage.
Yeah.
And I figured I did that because I believed in the project and I was having a phenomenal experience, and my collaborators on the development side and on the publisher side were all amazing. And I didn't even really keep track. I just kept writing until it felt like it was done. And then I kind of went back and was like, oh, turns out I'm like 30 minutes past my amount, which is non-trivial amount to be over by. Yeah. And I didn't think anything of it. 30 pages
over, I'd be in so much trouble.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I didn't think anybody would. It's way more noticeable with your kind of work when that were to happen, because obviously there's also a big downstream effect of, like, if they were to just auto book actors, for example, to read lines and perform scenes, or even like motion capture, you can't. It would never just happen on its own. It would be like, whoa, we got a lot of extra stuff here. We got to work out scope. But in my case, it was like, I'm just delivering music. Like,
so they probably just paid you for what was in the contract?
Well, so that was the thing. I did not expect that they would audit my deliverables to make sure that everything was in accordance with the contract. Both, I think, to protect them and to protect me, they looked to make sure that I didn't deliver less. Like, they were protecting themselves, that they weren't paying more for a thing that had a certain minimum threshold, but also it's to my benefit as well. So I get a phone call where they go, you're quite over Did you know that? And I freaked out because I thought my direct boss, the audio director, I thought would get in trouble for basically failing to manage the music. And because now the audio director had beholden the publisher to payments that were not agreed upon. So I called I made a phone call straight to the top of the food chain and was like, to be clear, I was not asked to do this. I did this of my own, and I am not expecting you to pay me for it. Like, I did that. That was a risk I undertook.
Yeah.
And I fully acknowledge that. And it's very important to me that my direct superior not get in trouble for basically playing fast and loose with the budget.
Yeah.
And they were like, no. Everyone's super happy. Look, we just wanted to make sure the number was correct because we owe you more money. And I was like, to be clear.
Well, they also legally kind of have to pay you. If you had a contract
it's
in
not
place.
in the contract?
I mean, the contract
if they set
does
a rate,
say,
then they have to pay you, otherwise they don't own it.
or they could have just not used the music.
Yeah.
They could have not used the music, or they could have renegotiated a lower rate for those extra minutes with you. But honestly, I imagine if you're talking AAA, it's easier for them just to write you a check than to call the lawyer. Yeah,
yeah, and the funny thing was, they were so gracious about the whole thing, and I was really worried that my boss was going to get in trouble. And they were not remotely upset. They were very happy, because this was all very last second. I mean, this was all conversations that were happening weeks before the game came out. So it was, and in hindsight, I was very apologetic to them, going, I did not mean to put you in a position that maybe feels precarious here. Like, oh shit, we're kind of over a barrel because we're at the end of the project. I said, I was just following my creative instincts, and we were all vibing and having a good time and writing music, and that's why obviously, if it came down between you have to pay or you can't use the music legally, obviously I wrote the extra because I believed that it benefits the game. And it's already like the game was past its gold mastering process and stuff, at least if memory serves. This was years ago. So it was one of those where I was like, okay, I will be more transparent in the future. I will keep better records. It wasn't even that I was hiding it. It's just I didn't even really realize. I just kept writing until it felt like we were out of time. It wasn't even until it felt like it was done.
Poorly for everybody, really. But sorry, to backtrack slightly, do you get paid for minutes delivered, and they can ask for as many iterations for minutes used, and they can ask for as many iterations as they want? Because that seems like you could get put in a really
There's
shitty
a
position.
couple of different schools of thought on this for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are
that's kind
composers.
of what Mick says, is that he delivered things, they said no, and then had too many re-delivers that he would then not be
usually
paid
you would
for,
contractually put a limit on those edits, right, Austin? Like
I don't. I actually am not. I don't support that philosophically. I don't. To me, it is not. You're already.
That's the norm. Most people would do that.
Most artists that I've worked with do that.
In music, it's a contentious subject. There's definitely a large swath of the composer community that thinks that there should be this is how many revisions before we're talking more money. I personally, I aspire to feel like part of the dev team. And I think that as an independent contractor, I'm already an outsider. And if I then go, by the way, if you're not happy, you have to pay me even more. Like, shouldn't it be my fault that you're the one who's not happy? I should be the one who says, like, let's work on it until it's good. Now,
unless you work with someone who sucks. It changes their mind a lot, right?
I was going to say, yes, that it is implicit in that.
It's a good faith kind of position for you to assume that.
But I agree. I would feel that way if most people were good.
Well, in my experience, the vast majority have been. If there's a lot of revisions, it's because we're finding it. I was just talking earlier today with somebody how on Abzu, for every 5 minutes of music that went into the game, I probably wrote close to 45 minutes.
Wow.
And that was not them telling me, that was not Matt Nava going, I don't like this, do it again. It was me going, I think I can make it better. And Matt going, then by all means.
Have you had any of those experiences then? Where you've worked with somebody who's requested just like an unfathomable amount of revisions where you were like, hold up, this is not worth the effort from me.
I've never said that. I lovingly chide Jack Attridge on Erica that he was probably the hardest to please director I've ever worked with.
That doesn't shock me at all.
But it wasn't. The thing was, he wasn't hard to please because he's a bad director. There are those. I've worked with those. Never in games though. I've been lucky in games in that regard because I'm sure they exist, but I've genuinely never had that. In film though, I've absolutely had directors that. They go do this, and you do it, and they go, I guess that wasn't it. What if we tried that? And
Dude, I've had that with brands. like brand deal stuff that I've done where I'm working for them to deliver a certain amount of stuff and they go, make sure you don't wear a shirt with patterns on it. Okay. We don't like the color. You have to change the color of your shirt. Why didn't you tell me the first time to wear a specific color shirt?
Yeah, they don't know. They have
sometimes be just absolutely ridiculous, absurd. Like, okay, I guess. How many of these do I have to expect to come back to?
It would be one thing if there's a 1,000-point checklist of things, but it's coming from a place of a clear and coherent vision. That I have no issue with that. It's when I feel like I'm on the tail end of a whip, and from their perspective they're doing this, but out at the far end of it you're swinging left and right and violently jerking around. But again, I've essentially never had that in my experience working in games, and that's just the dumb luck of the people that have reached out to me. They've been some combo of either really strong vision or they're deferring to my vision and they're going, you find it.
It's probably a part of the way that from everything you've really ever spoken about, the way that you pick what you work on is also based on teams that you want to work with, is my understanding. You're
very selective in that sense, right? There's a selection.
It's always based on the people above all. Like if I have a bad feeling about someone on a personal level, it can be the most lucrative or like exciting professional opportunity. But if it feels like, man, this is someone that when you're in the trenches and like, it's that 11th hour and you want to feel like this is someone that you'd really bend over backward for. Are they willing to do the same? And I've never red flagged out of a thing on a game. I mean, there's been a couple where, it didn't, I kind of was like, it's insufficiently kind of exciting or whatever, a variation of variables overlapping. But in film, I've absolutely, like on the first meeting where a director is like, I just want you to know, I demand perfection. And I'm like, okay, goodbye.
Yeah.
Like that is such a red flag. Like I demand that of myself, but the person that is like aiming for this mic drop in the introductory, let's get to know each other. I'm like, I want to, okay, fine.
If you're saying that you're a douchebag, go work at a gym.
It's a real, yeah.
It's like the shit that a personal trainer says.
I'm using that next time because in Hollywood you run into a lot of those kind of guys. I'm using the go work at a gym. I'm using that next time.
The funny thing is,
it's amazing.
In my experience, it's always the least experienced ones that are like that.
They're compensating.
It's insecurity.
Yeah, 100%.
It's insecurity.
Yeah.
I'll never forget like a student when I was at USC and I was scoring 4-minute student shorts. Those were the most difficult directors of my whole career.
Yeah.
They were like, we're all like 19-year-olds that don't know anything. And this one guy, I remember this one very specific guy, he was like, this is my entry point to the industry. If this isn't perfect, we all suffer. Like this needs to be the best work. And I was like, you're a child.
You don't know how much you don't know until you know. That's it.
Yeah.
So there is an interest.
Where does go ahead.
Let me just add one last thing about I will say I have long decried the per minute business model because I don't like that composers are financially incentivized to add as much music as humanly possible to a game. I don't like the idea that because I always use Castaway as my go-to example, but you could use The Last of Us as a corollary example in games where silence is a creative decision that is so powerful. The idea that the composer should be financially penalized for going, what if we didn't put music in this scene? Castaway is a movie that has no score until the third act. And even then, it's the back half of the third act. There is 14 minutes of score in a 2-hour film entirely consigned to the last 30 minutes of the film.
Didn't know that.
And the idea that Alan Silvestri should have been paid less than, say, Back to the Future or Forrest Gump or The Avengers on the basis of doing less work, when it was a creative explorational process to arrive at that. Now, I get the idea that on a practical level, like it will cost less. You hire the orchestra for a day instead of for 2 weeks and blah, 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 blah. That's all well and good. But the idea that you should value silence less than non-silence, to me, takes creative options off the table in a way that actually harms the game.
Would you prefer a flat rate?
Absolutely, yes. Okay. I always say, and because I don't also like the idea of, I don't think of music as like a thing I dole out in 60-second units.
Yeah, it's weird.
Musical development, sometimes the exact right thing is 30 seconds, and sometimes the exact right thing is like on Pathless, I remember we after 2 years of experimentation, one of the things we wound up with in the kind of non-combat, open world, very vibey explorational moments of the game is the music doesn't loop. I wrote like these 9-minute pieces that just tell their own kind of musical up and down story. And it has this vertical sort of modulation it can do based on your momentum and based on a lot of other variables, where you are in the world, how far you are in the storyline, all this kind of stuff. But fundamentally, I wrote a succession of really long pieces that just play and have the ability to be interrupted and have to be able to be rejoined and blah, blah, blah. But it's not just like a loop that goes. Well, as a result, it pushed the runtime of the score way beyond what we originally expected, but it was what the game needed.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm not...
Yeah, 60 seconds is very rigid for what should be extremely creative.
Yeah, and like, I understand, I'm sympathetic to publishers
wanting... to quantify it somehow.
Yeah, and I get that, and I recognize that it is a very convenient way to quantify it. So my ideal is always to say, and I very rarely with AAA publishers, I'm very rarely like granted this in fairness to them, and I'll go, okay, fair enough, we'll play by your rules. Like, it's not like this is a hill I'm gonna die on. Very few games are sort of the trade-off of working on the game not worth just going, okay, we'll play by the traditional rules. That's perfectly fair. But the proposal I tend to make is, let's use a per minute rate in order to figure out what we think is a fair all-in deal. And like, in order to give us a sense of scope and to just be able to have numbers to put on the table and discuss, and then also help us figure out now how much am I being paid versus how much are we wanting to spend if I need to hire a musician or a whole orchestra or all whatever, like what is the cost associated with this music as well? And then ideally, once we've kind of wrapped our head around the overall scope, we then sign on the dotted line and never look again at the particulars. And if it comes in a little under or if it comes in a little over, we're operating in a good faith place that this is predicated on everybody's just trying to make the best game. And I've come in, almost always I come in, my agent is ironically the one who's like, let's try to put some limitations, because she knows my predisposition is to go quite beyond.
Yeah.
And theoretically that puts me in a position of being taken advantage of. But on a AAA publisher, like I said with the story, they don't even really allow that. So that's why the Mick thing, I don't know what happened there. I don't want to pretend any kind of omniscience on the situation, but as described, that is very blatantly contract violating in terms of the way most contracts are typically written. Again, I don't know his contract, but that would be a thing that if they use it, they can't not pay for it. Like, that's just straight, that's common sense.
Yeah. So Mike.
Sorry, Mike. Yeah, sorry.
No. It's a great answer. It's exactly what I was asking. Mike, I assume that you've worked with contractors on any of your games before. How does it work for other departments?
So it varies. So yeah, most of we've only just through the recent kind of upsizing of the company, we're now hiring full time. Like, we were largely contractors for years and years and years.
Yeah.
It varies, and it varies from person to person. And there's different
and
arguments.
Also from department to department.
And also from department to department, there are definitely like norms, but then it's also I've heard really compelling arguments in multiple directions, like Austin there, like talking about like a fixed rate, like 100% how I like to work with a composer, and usually that's how most of our contracts are done. And yes, we work out like we'll start at that number of like what's our music budget, and then we'll kind of retroactively work with the composer to work out, well, what can we get for that money? What's reasonable for you? What's reasonable for us? And kind of, I think that's how we worked it with John Wick, without going into the full on the contract. Also, I think that's generally how we approach it. So I assume we did the same there. But like I
actually don't remember
Did we pay you? I think we paid you.
I'm still,
if you both don't remember, it probably means it was pretty good.
I keep being told the check's in the mail.
Just like my Journey vinyl.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you get paid when Alanah gets her vinyl. That's the rules.
I got this though. This arrived.
Oh, that's so incredibly sweet of you.
Yeah, I assume that Alanah designed this. It's very cute.
She did indeed.
But it's super varied. So the thing with music that makes music a very, very, very special case is, as we talked about on the show before, like the history of like unions and expectations about music rights just being very locked in on a lot of levels. So there's actually quite a lot of complicated kind of contractual like precedent and law and stuff that we all have to work around.
Plus, you can leverage it separate from the game in a way that's unique from every other thing.
Exactly, it's its own profit center if you handle it properly as well. So there's all of those layers. But with the other thing with music specific to this conversation is that the deliverables are definably specific to the individual doing the work, and there is an easy metric for them. So Austin turns in a soundtrack, he knows the seconds, and he knows he did it. And if you look at almost any other job you would hire a contractor for in a game, it's not that simple.
How many artists did you work with on Solitaire?
Solitaire was, in terms of artists, we had an internal 3D artist who did some jobs on it, but the primary we had a couple of internal artists who did little things on it, but the main artist was Jen, who did the portrait.
So
for the cards.
And I don't want to out Jen.
What was Jen's contract?
Well, sort of. How do you approach? Like, she did most of the art for the cards, right? So how do you approach?
Well, let me talk in general terms, so I'm not specific. I don't want to specifically talk about Jen's contracts. That's not fair. But like, there's definitely there's different approaches we could have taken. Let's use the example of like making some portraits and like the different ways that could have been worked out. One would have been to pay per hour. So literally per hour spent on the work, we pay a fixed rate. That's largely thought of as nice and predictable for the contractor. It's very budgetable and logical in terms of how that works. It requires a lot of trust on both sides. But the biggest argument against that as an approach is, fuck you, if it takes me an hour to draw a beautiful image, I should not be paid less. It's similar to what Austin was saying than if it had taken me 2 hours because I'm making that faster for you. You're getting the same outcome of that work, so why do you care how long it took me to make? And how dare you, like, I'm fast because I'm good and you should pay me more. So there's a lot of weird arguments around like hourly rates for contractors, and I know contractors who go one way or another. Or you could have paid per asset, which would be more like when you've done kind of commissioned illustrations and stuff. Alanah would be similar to that, of like you're paying for a piece, and yes, you've got some revisions and stuff. And then you've also got things where, and in most cases with most video game content, it's not. I would say like the cards in Solitaire are easier to define exactly. Like that's Jen's work. That's a specific thing. Most art made for video games is a concept that's going to go through 4 people. Different concept artists are going to iterate on it. We even have writers on
Ragnarok who are like, I think I wrote that. I don't remember who wrote that. Like,
and you throw all together, and then it goes to a 3D artist, and like if your script is being read by an actor who's being with a different mocap actor performing it, then that goes through an animator. Like, at what point can you quantify Alanah's contribution to that asset?
Yeah.
So with games, most roles tend to go down either like a blanket, we're paying you this much for the project, or an hourly rate. That's general. I would say that's the norm for most jobs in video games, kind of from a contracting point of view.
It makes sense.
But I've done different deals, and largely, I think this is the thing that a lot of people don't understand with contractors is it's a contract. So there's always room for negotiation. It's similar to like publisher-developer relationships. It's like there is no one size fits all. Ultimately, if I want to work with Austin on my next game, I'm going to bend my expectations of what that would look like in terms of contract. If he wants to work with me, he's going to be willing to bend as well, and we're going to kind of find something in the middle that works for both of us. Neither of us might be doing our default standard, but I've done some very strange contracts. I've done contracts where there's not even money exchanging hands. It's like a favor or something that they need for something else. I've done one contract where I did some graphic design for them in exchange for them doing some playtesting. That's cool. Because that was just, they do playtesting. I'm a graphic designer by trade, so like in 2 hours I could do a graphic design treatment for them.
I didn't know that about you.
And that was... Oh, yeah, that's where I started, graphic design. So,
I had no idea.
So I can do like, so I did like a brochure for them or something,
something like that,
because it's just like, that'll take me half an hour, and then they go and do a play test, which was useful to obviously what we were doing. So so you can find, there are a million ways of doing this and a million shapes. The one thing I would say is, I think it should be done with consideration, like, to what you need as a person. Like, obviously with Austin, and we all are, we're in a position where we have, some wind in our sails, some reputation, some ability to choose projects, some ability to, take some risks. There are definitely people at the start of their career who are much more exploitable than us because they can be screwed over massively, and that would could cause them to like miss a rent payment or whatever.
Too, like that definitely is a thing. Obviously, that we're in a position where we don't have to worry as much. But I was contract writing for a company, and they would send me. I don't know how to say it. Basically, the amount of writing that I was having to do because somebody else on the team was inefficient made me go to the boss and be like, hey, I recognize that I get paid hourly for all of this, but this is such a waste of money because I'm having to write more than I should ever need to. Not that I have a problem with it and I can take the money, but because the way that this is being supplied to me is so inefficient and redundant, that it's a waste of your money. And I remember going to a boss and saying that and being like, something has to change here. Yes, I can take tons of money for these easy writes, but my God, is this a bad system?
And if that boss was a good boss, they probably would have hired you for more work based on that. Like, they would have thought that was an impressive quality that you showed in that. Like, I've definitely had it where a contractor's come to me and been like, you can get so much more value out of me if you use me in this way. And it's always something I massively value, and I go back to those people.
Yeah, I mean, I kept working with him, but it was, I think that I was just like, this is such a bad use of everyone's time. Because again, I was having to do...
Did they change anything, or did they just
I don't think they did, I had to do double...
really? Okay.
I basically had to do double or even triple work because another department was operating poorly or whatever. Yeah. So I was getting to be paid triple the amount that I actually should for hours that I shouldn't be working, and it was just a whole mess. So it can kind of go both ways, where you can be in a position to help other companies function a little bit better as well if you aren't worried so much about financial risks, which I think we've spoken about contracts a lot. And take them seriously. That's the biggest thing.
Take them seriously, but remember, until you sign it, there's a conversation, and you can. And I think people should absolutely go for what they need.
I was just like, I'm not going to argue with this, and now I'm like fine-tooth combing every contract that I read. I have to get back to work.
Yeah, same.
Cool. Thanks for chatting. Thanks for joining us.
I probably should sleep. Cheers, everyone.
Yeah, you need to go to sleep.
What time is it there now? 10?
It's 11.
Yeah, it's a late one. Sorry, Mike. Thank you for joining again. It's
all right. Caffeine helps.
Happy Game Awards, everybody. Congratulations to Elden Ring. So I assume.
So you assume.
And music winner.
And music winner. All right. We will see you next week. I'm Alanah, a video game writer. That's Mike Bill. He's a video game director, and that is also Winter. He's a video game composer. We'll see you next time.
Bye.